Former mom influencer Ruby Franke and her business partner Jodi Hildebrandt are each facing up to 30 years in prison for child abuse. During sentencing, Franke offered a tearful apology with her estranged husband and their 2 children there in court.
Justice has been served in the Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt case. Both women have been sentenced and face up to 60 years in prison. With comments flying around that Ruby and Jodi are not all remorseful and are simply putting on a show for future hearings, let us take a deep dive into the background of the case to determine the possibility that disgraced family YouTuber Ruby Franke and her partner Jodi Hildebrandt could have killed the children. Ruby Franke was a popular YouTuber who made years of videos featuring her and her 6 children on the 8 Passengers channel. Her videos began with everyday scenes of parenting and interacting with her kids. But as the kids grew older, Ruby started to incorporate her disciplinary methods by her own admission as part of her content. What started out as a fun peek into the lives of an average Mormon family quickly turned into a displeasing sight. Ruby banned Christmas for 2 of her children, kept them home from school to clean the floor, and frequently threatened to deny them food.
I'm only going to say it one more time, and then you're going to lose the privilege to eat dinner.
Cut one more thing in my house. I'm going to take the scissors, look at me, and I'm going to cut its head off.
Grandma will be so mad.
So what are you going to do?
Are you going to cut anything else? No.
You promise? Look at Mama. I just got a text message from Eve's teacher, and she said that Eve did not pack a lunch today, and can I bring a lunch over to the school? This happens quite often when you're raising children, because I know that her teacher is uncomfortable with her being hungry and not having a lunch, and it would ease her discomfort if I came to the school with a lunch. But I responded and just said, Eve is responsible for making her lunches in the morning, and she actually told me she did pack a lunch. So the natural outcome is she's just going to need to be hungry. And hopefully nobody gives her food and nobody steps in and gives her a lunch.
And in those years, many fans raised concerns about her discipline methods. Jodi Hildebrandt, on the other hand, was not as popular as Ruby Franke. She was a mental health counselor, and even more shockingly, she is a mother of 2 herself. Jodi Hildebrandt was basically an enigma outside of her work. However, public licensing records and statements from her former clients have so far been a useful medium to gain more information about her. Such information includes how she ran the YouTube channel Connections. This platform offers paid courses for people to change and champion any addictive or self-destructive behavior, such as feelings of worthlessness or inadequacy, conflicts in relationships, intimacy problems, communication breakdowns, and frankly, any block that prevents having and creating peace. Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt collaborated on video content for the platform. Investigators even noted that Ruby Franke was listed as an employee on Hildebrandt's website. This seemingly perfect match made in heaven relationship was one that would cause a lot of pain and distress to everyone involved. Their partnership culminated in their arrests on the 30th of August 2023. Since the arrest, Ruby Franke's sisters, who are notably vloggers themselves, have spoken up about their mistrust for Jodi Hildebrandt and the teachings at Connections. One sister, Bonnie Llewellyn, mentioned in a YouTube video that they were unaware of the full extent of what was happening in Ruby's home because Ruby had distanced herself from her mother and siblings. Bonnie Llewellyn stated that she believed Ruby and Jodi's involvement with Connections led to complete indoctrination, and she disagreed with their extreme beliefs.
Kept quiet for 3 years on the topic of our sister Ruby and Jodi and Kevin and Connections. That is what we have stayed quiet about. We did not know what they were doing because, like we said, we were cut off. We did not have access to anyone. My thoughts towards Ruby and Jodi and Kevin and Connections is that it was all bullcrap. It was It was complete indoctrination of this thing that they created. I don't agree with how extreme they are on everything. I knew they were weird. I knew that they were off. Those are the things that we kept quiet about, because what was I gonna say? What was I going to do? I was not gonna come out and publicly say that I don't like my sister and I don't like what she's doing and I think she's weird. That is what we kept quiet about. It wasn't until about a year ago when we were able to reconnect with Sherry. Again, we kept that quiet. We never came out and said anything. You guys saw us together, and those were little glimpses when Sherry was ready to allow us to show those glimpses with her permission. And it was then that we were learning slowly bits and pieces of more. And that's where the part of behind the scenes, we did everything that we could. We did everything legally that we could do. And for those that were saying that they'd go in and bust down doors and do whatever it took to end up in jail, because from jail, I can't do anything. So I still stand by what I said, is that I did everything that I could with the knowledge that I had and within the legal rights to Ruby and Kevin.
Remember that Ruby's sister, Julie Griffiths-Deroux, has expressed a similar level of discomfort with Jodi and the teachings that Ruby was bringing to family events. She recalled how weird it all seemed in the beginning, and how uncomfortable Jodi's teachings made the family.
3 years ago, Ruby, everything was great. It seemed to be fine anyway. We were a typical family. She was getting some therapy counseling because their family needed it, which I think is great. However, I think you need to get it from a great source. Read the reviews. Jodi Hildebrandt and her website or therapy style, I don't know what you want to call it, connections, was not a great resource. And we all saw it. We all felt weird about this Jodi lady. We weren't comfortable with it. We didn't like it. We didn't like the teachings Ruby was bringing to the family functions, and we were this close to telling her, if you come to our family events anymore, we do not want to hear what you were learning through connections because we don't like it. We never did say that to her, but we thought it. Anyway, so 3 years ago, Ruby and I hung out bottling tomatoes, and then a few weeks later, crap hit the fan and she left the family. And she didn't even call me to say, hey, you know, Julie, you're doing this and this, I don't like it, you're living your life in distortion, so I'm gonna have to take some time away from you. No, literally nothing. She did call my mom and yelled at my mom on the phone for 45 minutes and accused her of things that were not true. It was almost as if Ruby had been making up memories from her childhood. She was trying to grab at anything she could, and she would exaggerate on everything. So she started all of her lies back then, lying to everyone in her life, getting rid of all of her friends and family, and I literally had no contact with her. She wouldn't respond to any texts or emails over the time that I tried reaching out to her. Never got a response from her. So
around the time she aligned with Jodi and her teachings, she began to cut everyone off from her life. From parents to siblings, friends, and even her husband, Kevin Franke. Meanwhile, Kevin Franke's attorney, Randy Kester, has told the media that Jodi Hildebrandt had encouraged the Frankes' 13-month separation. In his own words, Kevin did not want to be separated. He wanted to work through concerns as a family. There was never any formal written decree of separate maintenance or separation agreement. The separation was under terms prescribed by Ruby and Jodi Hildebrandt. Notably, this stance has changed. In the wake of all this, Kevin Franke has since filed for a divorce from Ruby Franke. Since the sentencing, Ruby Franke's family members have been speaking up, but we will get to that in a moment. First, let's consider these important questions. Do you think justice was served? Or perhaps could Ruby and Jodi have gotten tougher sentences? When you think back on the details of this case, it is heartbreaking. Ruby Franke and her partner, Jodi Hildebrandt, were very close to killing those children. To prove this, let us turn back to the relevant court documents. According to court documents, Ruby Franke pleaded guilty to 4 felony counts of second-degree aggravated child abuse on the 18th of December 2023. The victims in question are 2 of Ruby Franke's minor children, Russell and Eve. Court documents also determine that her partner Hildebrandt pleaded guilty to 4 out of 6 counts of second-degree felony aggravated child abuse days later. On the 23 read of December 2023. Now, the court documents stated that Hildebrandt intentionally or knowingly inflicted and allowed another adult to inflict serious physical injuries upon 2 children living in her residence. The document described the physical torture of one child who was forced into manual labor for long periods of time. This manual labor included wall sights and carrying boxes of books up and down stairs consistently. The document also states that the child was made to stand in direct sunlight for several days and work outside without shoes or adequate food and water. Even worse, the document revealed that the child's hands and feet were routinely bound together with rope and handcuffs, or at other times, the child would be tied to an adult or to weights. As gruesome and absolutely horrifying as this sounds, the abuse did not stop there. The document also described the second child being subjected to similar treatment, like being forced to run barefoot on dirt roads for an extended period of time. The papers then added that the child in question was either forced or coerced into jumping into a cactus repeatedly. And these are just the court documents for Hildebrandt. Ruby Franke's offenses aren't any better. We mean, there's a reason they both face similar charges. Both women were well aware of the abusive acts, and they did them anyway, for whatever twisted reason they had. So let us turn to the additional details that were revealed in Ruby Franke's plea agreement documents. First is the first count of child abuse that Ruby Franke pled guilty to, which is aggravated child abuse of RF being Russell Franke. The document said, quote, "The defendant's actions involved the physical torture of RF. Initially, RF was forced to do physical tasks for hours and days at a time. These included wall sights, carrying boxes full of books up and down stairs, and working outside. Eventually, RF was forced to do outside labor without shoes and in the summer heat. He was forced to stand in the direct sunlight for several days. He was forced to remain outside at all hours of the day and night and for extended periods of time. These actions resulted in repeated and serious sunburns with blisters and sloughing skin. RAF was denied adequate water for several of the days he was required to remain in the summer heat, and he was punished when he secretly consumed water. He was denied sufficient food, and when given food, he was given very plain meals like rice and chicken, while others in the house ate regular and more flavorful meals. He was isolated from other people and denied all forms of entertainment, including books, notebooks, and electronics. In addition, after RF attempted to run away in July, his hands and feet were regularly bound. Binding included being tied to the defendant and to weights. Many times, the binding included using 2 sets of handcuffs, one on the RF's wrists and one on the ankles. At times, with RF lying on his stomach, ropes were used to tie the 2 sets of handcuffs together so that his arms and lower legs were lifted off the ground. The bindings resulted in injuries to RF's wrists and ankles, where the handcuffs cut through the skin and damaged the muscle tissue. These injuries were treated with homeopathic remedies and covered with duct tape. Then the bindings were placed on top of the duct tape. Specific instances of abuse committed by the defendant include 1. Kicking RF while wearing boots, 2. Holding his head underwater, and 3. Cutting off oxygen by placing her hands over his mouth and nose. When you recall the facts, you will realize that this abuse occurred over a 3-month period over the summer, from around May to August. So, just think about how hot it was out in those months when Russell was made to stay outside. Ruby Franke also pled guilty to count 3 in the original charging document. This third count is about aggravated child abuse. On this note, the document read, "The actions described above cause severe emotional harm to RF due to the fact that they began in May and escalated throughout the summer months. Additionally, The defendant and another adult regularly sought to indoctrinate RF and convince him that he was evil and possessed, and that he needed to willingly be obedient to avoid punishment, and that the punishments were necessary to repent. He was also told that everything that was being done to him were acts of love. Now that's just 2 counts. According to the documents, Ruby also pled guilty to count 5 in the original charging document. This count 5 is about the abuse of EF being Eve Franke, who was only 9 years old at the time. According to the documents, the defendant's actions also caused severe emotional harm to EF. Other than binding in the specific instances of abuse RF was subjected to, EF was subjected to the same treatment as her brother. She was isolated and forced to do the physical tasks, remain outside, and denied food and water. She was also repeatedly told she was evil and possessed. The punishments were necessary for her to be obedient and to repent, and these things were being done to her in order to help her. EF was convinced that she was evil and needed to go through these things in order to repent. Moving on to the last count that Ruby Franke pled guilty to, it was the 6th count in the original charging documents. Now, this was abuse that constituted physical injury that included multiple injuries, specifically directed at Eve Franke. The document read, "The defendant's actions caused 2 or more physical injuries to EF. She was forced to work outside in the heat, barefoot. She was also forced to run barefoot on dirt roads for an extended period of time. F's feet were repeatedly injured, and she was repeatedly sunburned. When examined on August 33, these wounds were apparent by scabs, blisters, and sloughing skin. These are very serious and even life-threatening situations that nobody, let alone children, should be subjected to. And to make it all worse, the children were conditioned and made to believe that they were evil and possessed. Imagine going through such a horrific experience while being manipulated. There are absolutely no words to describe how vile this case is. Just imagine for a second what would have happened if the child had not escaped that afternoon. This abuse had been going on for months and would have gone on for much longer if they weren't caught. Going back to the 30th of August, this was the day one of Ruby Franke's children, who had been staying in Jodi Hildebrandt's home, made his way to a neighbor's home and asked him to call the police. In the 911 call, the neighbor reported that the 12-year-old looked emaciated, duct tape was wrapped around his ankles and wrists, and he asked for food and water. The emotional caller said at intervals that the child was afraid and that there were clear signs that he had been detained.
911, the address of your emergency. Okay, and the phone number you're calling from. Tell me exactly what's happened.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. And he's said he just came from a neighbor's house, and we know there's been problems at this neighbor's house. He's emaciated, he's got tape around his legs, he's hungry, and he's thirsty.
Okay. Is your door locked?
No, I'm sitting outside with him on the front patio.
Okay, cool.
His ankles are taped up, and he won't tell us why.
Okay.
But he has duct taped around each ankle. Yeah, there's sores around them. I think there's a good chance he's been...
He also said...
Oh, and he has them around his ankles. I mean, his wrists as well. Okay, this boy has been... He needs... This kid has obviously been... I think he's been detained. He's obviously covered in wounds.
Okay. Let's get the paramedics headed over that way, okay?
Oh, that's a good idea, too.
At some point during the course of the 911 call, the child identified his mother as Ruby Franke and indicated that the home he had just escaped from belonged to Jodi Hildebrandt. According to a press release issued by the Santa Clara Ivins Public Safety Department, the police found another child in the home in a similar physical condition of malnourishment. According to a search warrant filed in the 5th District Court in Utah, the police alleged the 12-year-old child had deep lacerations from being tied up with a rope. The child informed medical personnel and officers that a cayenne pepper and honey paste was made to put in his wounds. Evidence that corroborated this use of cayenne pepper was found in Jodi Hildebrandt's room. This evidence was in the form of medical gauze dressings near a cayenne pepper and honey paste, according to a law enforcement official who was on the scene. As you can imagine, this observation added to Jodi Hildebrandt's knowledge that abuse was going on in the home. Both women were arrested that same day, and each woman was charged with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse. Ruby Franke's 4 other children were then taken into the custody of the Department of Child and Family Services. Again, we ask, what if the child had not gotten out? What if he had not run into a neighbor patient enough to listen and believe his claims? Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt were sentenced to 4 counts of 1 to 15 years served consecutively. Depending on what the Board of Pardon and Parole decides, that could ideally be like 60 years in prison. Now that Ruby has been sentenced, everybody wants to know what is going on and how the family has reacted to it all. How are the children faring? What do her family think about her? And how are they moving past the entire ordeal? Well, we have some insights into that. We imagine that when Jodi pled guilty to the child abuse charges against her, all prior victims felt a wave of relief. They must have felt the certain ease that comes with knowing that justice, in some form, was going to be served. None was probably happier than Jodi Hildebrandt's niece, Jodi Hildebrandt.
Now, Jesse, I know this must be difficult to revisit, and I appreciate you joining us tonight.
Yeah, it's been surreal, to say the least, the last few months, and especially in the last week.
I can imagine. And your aunt has admitted to some heinous acts of abuse against children. Have you been shocked to see any of this?
Shocked, no. I went through very, very similar experiences when I was 16 years old, when I was left under her care. And the similarities are hard to listen to. This has been a pattern of hers since, for 15 years at least, if not longer. I can't speak to what she did before me, but this is not new.
If it's not too difficult, can you share with me, what did you experience? What happened at the hands of your aunt?
It's hard to quantify and everything that happened, because it was not just physical abuse, but it was emotional and severe spiritual abuse as well, because of the culture that already exists within the Mormon Church. She took advantage, and there was being duct taped and starved and being emotionally isolated and tortured, being forced to sleep outside in the snow, telling my family that it was because she was afraid that I was going to murder her in her sleep, telling me that Satan was working through me, and all the while I believed what she was telling me.
Or so we thought. This is Adam Steed. Being one of Jodi Hildebrandt's victims himself, he was no doubt ecstatic that she had been sentenced. Imagine he couldn't contain himself, so he took the microphone from Jesse Weber of Law and Crime Network and granted himself an interview.
I almost fell over in the courtroom when I heard Jodi say that she loved those children. Jodi doesn't love children. Jodi's like Ted Bundy.
Moving on, there have been a couple of reactions from family members. There was this post from Bonnie Llewellyn on her Instagram page that seemingly shows everyone her stance on her sister's sentencing. Bonnie posted a heartwarming montage of videos taken on a family trip. The caption reads, "The world is full of distractions, and I have eyes for them. Satan himself could not come close to making me harm them." This could point to a couple of things. Notably, we haven't heard from Bonnie or Julie throughout the process until now, aside from the early disclaimer YouTube videos. They weren't at the sentencing and are most likely distancing themselves from all things Ruby. It does look like she's moving forward by trying to seek some time out for family bonding and possibly healing. The statement in the caption, "Satan himself could not come close to making me harm them," is almost like she is saying she could never do what Ruby did. No matter the higher power, or no matter what a counselor with an all-knowing complex thinks.
Just how deep in the weeds Ruby Franke got with Jodi Hildebrandt, because I think we can all agree no people in their own right mind of common sense would ever think about doing these things to the children that they birthed and that they love. And I think that's what we're hearing here from Bonnie, especially with the montage of photos. It was really heartfelt. Bonnie and Julie have been pretty quiet as it pertains to speaking out on Ruby. They haven't done any real public interviews, as we've seen, where they actually take questions on this. So they have the creative control to put their message out the way they want. And I think they did it effectively, at least Bonnie did, in saying, hey, this is not me, this is not my family, but this is my sister, and I wouldn't think about doing the same things that she did.
Chad Franke, the second Franke child, also posted a reaction after the sentencing. According to the reports, an account belonging to his girlfriend posted this 24-hour story on TikTok shortly after the sentencing. A lot of commenters have since acknowledged the fact that it is a positive sign that he can now joke about his trauma. As for his elder sister, Shari Franke, she has chosen the silent route. There have reportedly been countless attempts to get her to speak, but none of them seems to be working. If anything, they only seem to bother her healing process.
On her Instagram, several things I'm going to read. One was a post that said, "To every reporter and media journalist, leave me the hell alone. I am not talking to anybody. I can speak for myself when I am ready and don't need you to do it for me. Again, leave me the hell alone." There was another message where she kind of took screenshots of different email requests from different outlets trying to get a statement from her. And then there was another post where it said, "Crazy how the news gives my family crap for exploiting the kids and then make money off of exploiting my family. Shame on you." Your reaction to that?
We believe people need to understand when someone is not ready to speak. People grieve in different ways. Some people grieve through speaking and getting it off their chest, while others prefer not to. Despite the fact that there's so much interest in this case and that people want to hear from her, she is a human, and her mental needs must be respected. Regarding Kevin Franke, the now estranged husband of Ruby Franke, he has not reacted publicly as well. While he doesn't seem interested in taking time out for that, he has been up to some other matters that are connected to the case. Over the past months, Kevin has been advocating for reform in Utah, with special reference to codes concerning life coaches and similar professions. Recently, during the closing stages of Utah's legislative session, a lawmaker introduced a Senate bill that focused on life coaching requirements. During a committee session, Senator David Hinkins read out a comprehensive letter from Kevin Franke. This letter is said to outline the necessity for industry regulation. The letter not only addressed concerns stemming from Ruby Franke's case, but also from past incidents involving individuals like Jodi Hildebrandt. The proposed measures aim to establish clearer pathways for obtaining licenses and maintain an accurate registry of life coaches. We applaud Kevin on this one. Not everybody should bestow themselves the title of a life coach. These things need to be regulated by law so that people like Jodi Hildebrandt can't hurt unsuspecting people so easily.